by two. Marauder, McTow.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
What do you want to do?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I will be joined by my regular co-host, Julian Darius. Now, we are reaching into the farther end of the Red Dwarf saga. As we've said before, we've left the BBC years behind us. We've gone back to Earth, but now we're going to be doing Dave proper. In this episode, we're going to be tackling Series 10, and then we've got 11, 12, and the Promised Land beyond that. Now, we are going to jump straight in. I will hand you over to myself and Julian as we get stuck right into the first full series from Dave. And do you think we think it's any good? Let's go find out. Okay, so let's move on this. So it took 4 more years. So we go from 2009 or early 2009 to sort of late 2012 for us to get Series 10. Back on, it's on Dave. It's another sort of 6 episode run, and we're very much back to the old format. You know, the sort of the dwarf crew are back on the Red Dwarf. It's just those 4, and if that status is going to be sort of maintained. So when did you come across Series 10?
About when it aired. Because much like Back to Earth, I was sort of watching news on comic book websites and pop culture websites. And so, for me, Back to Earth was like, a big deal. And then it came out and I saw it and I thought, okay, well, that was an odd little sort of denouement to Red Dwarf. And then I saw news sort of out of nowhere, oh, they're going to do another season. And I thought, oh, wow, that's awesome. I can't wait to see it. And then I saw it and I thought it was good, but I didn't really revisit it or remember it. And then subsequently, when they announced that they had another 2 seasons, at the same time announced, I said, oh, I got to remember to watch those, and then never did.
Yeah, I think for me, it took me a couple of years, actually. I think around this time, weirdly, I felt reluctant to watch it when it first sort of came out. I mean, I'm looking at this sort of the episode list now, and sort of, I think it was I actually sort of came to watch it when I knew they were coming back for Series 11, and I was like, oh, they are going to do more. I really should go back and watch sort of Series 10, and did so. And I think I went back to these with some real trepidation, thinking, I don't know what UK TV is going to do to them, or sort of that sort of thing. So it took me a while. I definitely came, and even now I feel differently to these than I do to the original show, which I think I don't know if is valid. And let's not say I don't like them, but what's your sort of thoughts on these sort of let's just say Series 10 then as a sort of a group, this sort of 6 overall. What are your overall thoughts to begin with?
Well, I understand what you're saying about sort of like feeling differently about them. I don't know that that's fair, but I mean, they do, some of it is that it doesn't have the sort of like hard tumble feel to it as, the original show. But I mean, you and I have discussed how I'm more partial to the first and second season than I think most Red Dwarf fans are. I kind of like the rawness of it. At the same time, I like the polish of this. And I think that, the episode for episode, I'll even put Back to Earth in there, Back to Earth and 10 and 11, probably can hold their own with certainly an average season of Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
They're not a lot of amazing episodes, but there aren't a lot of real stinkers. And even the ones that are sort of middling episodes are not episodes that I cringe at as much as, or I'm angry by. I think, oh, well, I've kind of seen that before. I think what really bothers me is I don't have the same affection for it. I mean, I like it. I want to I want to feel more for it than I do. I'll defend it. I think, I would be one of those defenders of the new stuff. But having said that, I mean, I do think that I felt even when we were discussing like 6, 7, and 8 that you get into this situation where repeating yourself starts to be a big problem. Where
Yes.
I feel like, okay, well, we've done this before, right? I mean, Rimmer World is like the, third take on I've got another Rimmer here and I don't get along with him. And Rimmer World works better than the others. But, then you redo Rimmer World another 3 times. And it's essentially the same thing. And so we get a lot of these new takes on old tropes for the show. And I think they're probably as good as the average older version of them, but they're sort of repetitions.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the thing that sort of stabs to me is watching this series. One of the things that stands out most is this is sort of Dave saying, okay, well, we did the special, which was a sort of, we thought was going to be a one-off and, we could do different bits and pieces with that. Now what we want you to reconnect with the show. We want you to sort of identify with it again. So we are going to go back and we're going to sort of, maintain the status of, like I say, series 5, I think was the last time they were really on Red Dwarf, just the 4 of them. And we're going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to harken back to a whole bunch of things that you will remember. So we'll go through it. The first episode, we're going to mention Rimmer's family. Do you remember he's got brothers here? You're going to meet Howard. Episode 2 is going to be all about how Lister is his own father. You start to get these bits. I mean, which one is it? Fathers and Sons again. So series 2, episode 2. The other thing, you have what you call the new computer.
Yes.
It feels reminiscent of Queeg.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's just a few, as they go through, they get less like that. But the first couple are very much sort of like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? That's how it feels a little bit. And so it definitely does the callback stuff. But the one thing I would say is, like you said, the polish is there. I feel there's some good moments. To me, the series sort of gains momentum a little bit. And my favourite episode is probably the last episode, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things in it that I kind of like. That I just think, there's some daft jokes and stuff, but there's some stuff in that last episode that really works for me. But also because there's a sort of an acknowledgement of repetition in that last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into more detail. But in the very first thing is that the very first thing of that last episode is the ship gets invaded by a sort of a replicant. That we sort of know that the rogue replicants are out there, and this guy he wants to sort of this droid sort of wants to start he's going to pursue them across time and space, and they're like, look, we've done this before. Can you not just leave us alone? Like, this is getting really boring. Right. And it's sort of it almost I know it's a daft joke, but it sort of acknowledges the sort of the place they're at. Where they're like, we have gone around this a lot, repetition of doing that. There's only so much you can do, and I kind of like the sort of that. And they do sort of again up the ante by having the droids, the rogue simulants, it's rogue simulants, and not all of it's good, but again, it's another sort of quite a good. I don't know. There's something about that last episode I find quite sort of satisfying. But yeah, there's some really good moments in this series, but there's a lot of things that sort of feel retreads of things previously.
Yeah, I agree. Although I feel like what I liked most about Series 10, especially on this rewatch, was the earlier episodes. I don't look. I feel like that. For me, the final episode. My note at the top says not so good. Um, so and there's stuff like in Dear Dave #5 that that I like, but not as satisfying for me. 4 is not as satisfying for me. I mean, I think that the first 3 especially, I don't know that I love them, but I admire them in different ways. I think the same way that you look at 6 and you say like it acknowledges, and I think you're right, it acknowledges this repetition. Takes that sort of subtext and makes it the subject. Like meeting Howard Rimmer. Well, yeah, we've heard of these things, but how many Rimmer episodes have we had? Right? We know he's intimidated by his father. We know he's intimidated by his brothers. It's not a great episode, I freely admit, but it feels like kind of a classic episode. It is sort of, it feels like that partly because it's repeating it, but it makes me think, why didn't the old show do this? Why didn't they introduce these? I mean, if you're gonna do this plot, this seems like such a clever iteration of the Rimmer forced to confront himself sort of plot.
Well, the weird thing is this series does it twice, and sort of like almost like change this series. We have sort of quite a big lot of Rimmer talk going on this whole sort of retrospective, but this series in particular changes two sort of fundamental things of who Rimmer is. He's always had this notion, and I don't know if it works for the better or what, but you've had this notion of him being the runt of the litter for all intents and purposes. He's got these sort of older brothers, and Howard, I think, is the eldest. Or it seems like he's the youngest in this, but you got these other brothers that are sort of like picked on him and give him wedgies and stuff in the past, and they all went on to become high flyers in Space Corps, and so that sort of always rested on his sort of like thing. But then to learn that actually Howard lied about that, and he's a second technician as well. It's funny, in the moment, and I kind of like sort of like it shows that all Rimmers are a bit, knobbish. But to me, it's almost like, okay, but actually, knowing all this other stuff about Rimmer, and having this sort of this origin and this mythology around him, sort of like, well, that's why you got Ace Rimmer, because he did have these brothers that sort of picked on him and had these things, and he had to fight back, and he had that break, so that's why he became Ace, and that's obviously been so. That was felt quite important to me, that he was the runt of the litter, and that. He always says about not having the breaks and all this other crap, but there's a reason that he resents himself and it's always been there. And then at the very end, in the episode at the beginning, the 6th episode, there are bits, you then find out that his dad isn't his dad. And actually, he's actually, whilst his mother is his mother, his father is actually the gardener. And you're just like, I don't know, that again sort of undermines this sort of thing of, well, he was the runt of the litter, and sort of like, oh, so now he's genetically predisposed to being an idiot. That's why he's not as good as his brothers. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work for me, because that sort of takes away all the stuff that sort of like him, being this sort of person. The whole nature nurture thing, I suppose you can get into, but I don't know. Those two facts in particular sort of bother me a little bit about this series.
Yeah, I think you're right that. What I have in my notes is that basically I feel like those two episodes contradict each other, right? That, essentially the your father's not your father, which I think is a legit, sort of retcon. I think it's interesting. I don't know what it does, and it's sort of for the character, and it's very quickly sort of brushed under the rug. It's kind of mentioned, but it's not like he becomes this working class hero from then on. And the same thing about Howard, that he sort of learns, oh, my brother was a liar. This whole thing that I've looked up to is a lie. Now, I like this trope. I mean, I guess both of the episodes have that going for it, but I like that idea. I mean, it's sort of similar to when you find out that the captain of Red Dwarf lied his way into the position.
Yeah.
There's something about all those successful people, you just don't get to see their interior space, and in their interior space, they're liars and screw ups, and I mean, there's taking the piss out of them, out of the successful people, the rich people, I think is good fun. But it does seem as if Rimmer cannot fundamentally change, right? Or else we get a new status quo. And because this is the revived show, the last thing they want to do is really fundamentally change that dynamic, right? You want to bring back the old dynamic. And so you get these episodes, but they cannot result in really Rimmer changing.
No, and that's it. I mean, the fact that he does find out that his brother lied and made this stuff up, that should fundamentally change him. That should, change his approach to actually then maybe I'm not so bad or something else. But like you say, it doesn't. It's just played for a joke. Because I also get I also have other questions about because you find that his brother is also a hologram, died in action or whatever. And he is joined by a simulant, a simulant from the other ship. They are the lone survivors, and all I'm thinking is, well, why bring back Howard Rimmer then?
Right.
What drove the ship's computer or this simulant to bring back Howard Rimmer? Then when they could have brought back some sort of scientist or the captain or whatever. Surely there's a protocol for that. So even then it feels a bit like, because Rimmer was brought back with a purpose.
To keep Dave sane.
Yeah, and although Holly may have made a bad choice, that's debatable. But he brought back with a purpose. But then see that his brother Howard was brought back. I'm a little bit like, well, what purpose? And again, I'm just nitpicking, But that's what.
No,
again,
I mean that makes sense. These are good points.
And there are parts in this episode that I like, but. Yeah, as an opener, I have to admit, I remember the first time I watched this. I remember watching this first episode and feeling worried, thinking, "Oh
no,
yeah, this may not be, this may be what I fear it could have been." The whole thing with Dave with Lister being on the phone the entire thing, trying to get through to get himself a Stirmaster. It's funny, but
okay.
It's okay, but I'm thinking again. No, but then I'm thinking well, who's he calling? They're in 3 million years into deep space. How is he getting passed between departments? Who is this company, this organisation that's going to send him a bloody Stirmaster 3 million years into deep space? We don't even know the human race exists. Are these just droids that are continuing to produce this tat for QVC?
I like that idea, but I don't know where that commercial's coming from. It seems as if they, look, in both 10 and 11, every episode they run into another ship. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just a thing that happens. And I thought that commercial was coming from the other ship. And no, it's not.
No.
It's it is unclear to me who he's on the phone with.
It never makes sense to me. And by the end, it becomes a little grating. The funnier thing is the moose joke.
Yes. Right. Rimmer fails his test, and but because there's this question about how did this person in Sweden, I believe, die
in the 1970s.
Right, and listeners happen to have read this bit of trivia about how many moose deaths they had. The bit with the cat saying, why do you let the moose drive? And it was, oh, he wasn't driving. Well, if you pick up a moose, what do you expect? I think all of
Yeah.
that stuff works very well too. Yeah, the moose stuff
Yeah.
was good. Well,
Yeah, that's what I mean. So there's bits in this episode that really work, but
I remember being annoyed, and I still am a little, by the like glitz, the resentment glitch that that kind of like being frozen in this like face as your eyes go rainbow. I mean, it's fine. It's a nitpick. It just that kind of irritates. But I like the concept of how tortured Arnold Rimmer is by resentment. That at one point Crichton refers to it as, you're suffering from self-created malware. I mean, I love how resentful he is. And then, I love that you find that Howard is that resentful too. And that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, recently there was a news report that Donald Trump's kids said that when they were little, they would go skiing and he would sort of trip them and make them fall in the snow in their skis in order to win and get to the bottom faster. There's something about this Rimmer story of like, yes, we were supposed to be this aristocratic family, but we were bred to be so competitive. But in truth, we were all stupid. We all know we're frauds. That I really like, despite all the. I mean, I agree, it's not a great episode, but
no, I do like that. And if you were to find out that was the case, if anything, I suppose you could argue as well that it actually gives Ace Rimmer more validity. That even in the face of it, he actually was managed to stand up and actually in some reality. Or actually, even in this reality, because obviously this isn't the Rimmer that we know from series 1 through 7. This is I always assume this is a hologram version of the one we met in series 8.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I sort of ignore that completely, but you're right.
Yeah. I wanted to ignore it, but when I got to sort of, again, like we got back to Earth, I was like, no, he's now a hologram again. I've got in my head canon, I'm adjusting that. If everything's taken place, then at some point after Series 8, he died. There's nothing there, but I couldn't find anything, but that's what happens to me. He died and was brought back again as a hologram.
I assume that too. I just think, no, okay, we've restored the status quo. But you're right. It's the reboot Rimmer who, has not gone off and become Ace. Yeah.
And that's what he is. He feels like that Rimmer from earlier seasons. He's still the sort of up the ziggurat, lickety split, sort of everything's tickety boo kind of sort of that Rimmer. But yeah, no, it's an average episode, but it didn't land for me in many ways.
That's fair.
Fathers and Sons, though, the next episode 2, revisits. It's weird that it revisits one of the things that I sort of hated most about season 7.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm like, but it sort of, in doing so, there are jokes in this that I laugh at, that I kind of like. I like the fact, I think the payoff at the end is a bit silly and stuff, but I like the video interactions of Lister with himself.
Yeah.
Is really well done. And again, it's sort of some good comedy timing and some really good editing. But yeah, the idea that actually he gets himself blind drunk and writes himself a Father's Day card the year before so that he can't remember what he put in, and then Crichton delivers it to him a year later so he can receive a Father's Day card and can't remember what was put into it. Like, there's little bits like that I think are quite funny. And when he sort of there's a great interaction which feels like classic Dwarf between sort of Rimmer and Lister, when Rimmer's sort of saying like, oh no, he is a good father. He's sort of done this and that. He says, well, is he though? I think your father's a bit of a bastard. Like, he left you under a pool table and abandoned you.
Yeah.
This other stuff. He's sort of like, he didn't leave you with anything. And then he's like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's not a good father, is he? And that interaction, and there's sort of like a smirk on sort of Rimmer's face when he's done it, of sort of like, oh, it's a nice little dig in there. I like that. yeah, all that sort of stuff works in this episode. I think there are some good bits in it. It's sort of like almost like the B plots that sort of like, again, the stuff with Pre sort of,
Yeah.
runs its course very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that is I don't think it's terrible, but is the weakest part. I mean, I just much as I think, like, look, again, not a great episode, but there are things that I admire about both of these episodes in the same way that I feel that, like, Howard is, why didn't they do this? This would have been such a great version of that story. This is so much better than Ouroboros. I mean, when we
Yes.
talk about Ouroboros, it is a mess. And
Yes.
and it doesn't come off. It wants to be clever. This is taking that same idea and having a lot of good fun with it, and it works. And it's drugged down by the pre stuff, but and it doesn't really amount to anything. Again, it's sort of like the previous episode, and we've seen this in a lot of episodes where, like, a character learns something and they seem to have fundamentally changed at the end, and then they're right back to their usual self. And some of that is, the formula returning to the status quo. But it seems as if these first two episodes really have that problem, because at the end, here, much as sort of like, back to Earth, Lister should be changed by these events, but he's not. Still, I mean, I'll defend this as taking this idea from Ouroboros, not running away from it and doing something really hilarious and fascinating with it.
No, I agree. I agree. I think this episode makes that, like that. It's terrible in the Series 7 episode. It really is dreadful. But this almost like this improves that. It makes that thing better by having this episode. Because again, like I said, they have fun with it. It's that they've taken the idea, and instead of sort of focusing on sort of, they try and get deep into the meta side of it. They do just have this idea of like, well, how would Dave deal with that? Like, what would he do with it? And so to have this idea of sort of like the Father's Day stuff, and then for him to have those father-son interactions, but with him and his drunk self. It's just really good. Like the videos where, especially, he has this video that he's recorded whilst drinking, and he sort of, woke up with a hangover and he can't remember anything he's done. And it's these sections of like, right, well, I've signed you up. I think I can imagine lots of fathers and sons have sort of had these interactions with them. You're not doing anything with your life, Dave. You've got good skills. You should be doing something. You're wasting your life. I've signed you up for this. And it's sort of like, so go off and go. First, it's like, go to the dentist, go do this. Or, no, I'm not going to not do that. Actually, fast forwards to the next segment. It's like, you didn't listen, did you, Dave? You didn't listen. You didn't do as I said. I know you've skipped forward. Go do it. And it's just like, the dialogue is pitch perfect. And Craig Charles plays it brilliantly. So, it's a highlight in this, and sort of, I would say that this is a definite improvement on Trojan for me. I enjoy this episode much more.
Well, I think that business with him being, with the video culminates in himself as the father in the video having thrown the guitar out of an airlock, and it has this kind of like future echoes thing of like, that could not happen. I know this could not happen, and then sort of pulling the carpet out from under the viewer, because you see the guitar and it's 2-dimensional. It's all it's a fake, and then the son Lister, I mean our Lister, having sobered up, storms out and says like, "You never understood me, father," and that is just one of the great moments. And I like that, there's also this running gag about the vending machines doing Siamese whispers.
Yes.
Chinese whispers,
Chinese whispers.
which winds up being, do Siamese sisters get whiskers and stasis?
Yeah.
I mean, which, this is a clever joke. It's more clever than funny, but I like, there's a trend in both of these seasons that I like sort of the vending machine jokes. I like the robot jokes.
I agree with that. I like the fact that the vending machines have sort of come back as a bit of a thing, and because early on they would talk, but not to this degree. But yeah, I like the fact that they've got characters, and they've almost got like relationships with some of them as well. They have later on.
Yeah.
I like that they've got personalities and things. Yeah, it work that element actually works quite well, and is it's a new dynamic to it that actually is pretty funny. I can't remember if it's in this one or whatever, but the ones where Dave sort of is trying to sort of prove that he still can be sort of alluring, and sort of he says, "Oh, you got your case. That's you're looking really shiny. You're looking really good." And she's sort of like, he was touching my my logo. Yeah, he had his hand on my logo. I didn't. I may have brushed it, but I didn't do it on purpose. And she's like, "You're such a, you're always doing this." He's like, it's some of that stuff's really good.
And I think that's in season 11. Oh.
So yeah, I do like that they sort of expand on these things. But again, like I say, this is a good solid sort of Lister episode.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the the only thing I do like about Pre is when she's like, "I've done all the repairs, Arnold," and he's like, "Excellent, that's fantastic." And then they go and see it, and it's an absolute disaster, and could really damage the ship. And she's like, "Well, I anticipated," because she's able to predict the future. Sort of, it's almost like Cassandra again, isn't it? It's a mix of like Puig and Cassandra.
Yeah.
That thing of like she's predicted how badly he would do the maintenance and repairs, so she's just done a really like bad job of it as well. I think things like that are quite, and he's like, "Well, this is quite embarrassing, actually, really," sort of like to be pointed out to me. That's the only bit in it I kind of like, because then the end of it is sort of her becoming sort of going a bit Hal 9000, sort of like, "Well, I'm going to have to kill you all off," sort of thing. And then she has to be out sort of like defeated by logic.
Right. With which ties into the father son thing. I mean, I know what you're saying. Like, I like her predictive technology. I like these sort of like, here's what you're going to say, then you're going to say this, and now you are free to not have this conversation. I do like the sort of logic of that and the attitude of that. And I do like the conversation about, selecting her attributes and, make her young, make her have big breasts, I mean, that's a good gag. But oh no, it doesn't matter. But then this thing about like, that she did what Rimmer would have done. It's not followed through in the episode because she's not doing what Rimmer would do. She's quite competent other than that business. She's competent enough to chase Dave around the ship and, force him out an airlock. So, I mean, it's just kind of dropped, and it's an interesting idea. It's a clever idea, but, even that, the pre-storyline can't quite get right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what I think about this. It's sort of like every episode, and as we go through them, every episode sort of feels like, pretty good, but what I mean? It's like, it's pretty good, but when we go back to some of the earlier episodes, like when they're firing on all cylinders, like you don't do that. You're just so absorbed in the whole thing that And I think we said this before. Like we've been harsher. Or we've been a lot less harsh on episodes where there were clearly flaws, but we've really enjoyed them because they've worked. And then like other episodes where they don't quite work as well, like you'll point out, nitpicky things that would still exist in other episodes, but they just don't work. And I feel that's the same with this. Like you can nitpick on these quite a lot,
yes,
because they're not gelling quite right.
True. I mean, but I think that there's less to nitpick. I mean, I think that. Again, I mean, there are problems, but I will defend what they're trying to do. And I think actually, the next episode, Lemons, always reminds me of the JFK episode,
Yes.
which is not a good episode, but which I sort of defended as brave and interesting, and it doesn't really work. But I have an instinct to say, wow, that's really amazing that they did that. In sort of the same way of like, oh, well, that's an amazing Blade Runner bit there. But there, that gets in the way of the main story. Whereas here, I feel like, oh, you did a time travel story about Jesus, 2 thumbs up, man. That's amazing.
Yes. Do you know what? There are parts of this episode that this is one of those episodes again where I'm sort of like I really enjoy most of it. But yeah, it's a brave episode. I also like the way it ends, because you also get an inkling into sort of like Rimmer's family religion, and so you get a Jesus, and I like the way he's introduced as well, which is quite clever.
Yeah,
but this idea that Judas was actually Jesus' twin brother and had sacrificed himself and all this other stuff. They really are sort of like pointing, poking the stick into Christianity in this one. And I think it's quite interesting. But again, like, we're sort of falling into what I would sort of say is, we've seen it a few times, it's like the Simpsons effect, isn't it? Like, okay, the episode starts in this place and it's going to go somewhere completely different. Like, this episode ends up with a rejuvenation shower. That's the point. A flat pack rejuvenation. Yeah, isn't it? The flat pack rejuvenation shower that they get wrong. Sends them back in time. And so basically that's sort of like a, just an instigator for the main plot. But you got no idea if you didn't know what this was about, you got no idea where this is going to go.
Right.
When it starts. And it's quite good fun actually in this episode. And it's sort of like, they keep making these daft jokes, and the idea that when they do go back in time, they do land in sort of Britain and then have to walk halfway around the world to find lemons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that switch from Britain to India is strange. I mean, there again, it's that kind of, what you call the Simpsons thing. I think that, Lister says, Jesus as an exclamation, and you hear, yes, from behind him, I mean, there's a lot of, I guess this was made after Da Vinci Code got big, and Da Vinci Code kind of stole everything from Holy Blood, Holy Grail. So, the whole idea of Jesus might have been switched on the cross, I mean, that's discussed extensively in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, along with the Mary Magdalene stuff. And then, of course, like the India theory is kind of like a hippie theory, right? That he got these, the blessed are the meek idea from, I mean, we'll go into the Judas thing, but I mean, I just think it's a lot of fun to see Jesus on Red Dwarf. I mean, they actually take him back with them to the future, and then Jesus saying that he's horrified by what Christianity has become and how many people have died in his name, and he just wants to go back and ruin it, make sure this doesn't happen. I mean, that's very gutsy. And of course, by the end, I mean, and I think it's entirely appropriate. I mean, certainly anyone who, what we remember is like the Beatitudes, the stuff that people really praise Christianity for, because other religions can be draconian, but that stuff was pretty novel. That Jesus is not a guy who's going to be like, the Crusades and killing gay people. Yeah, that was a good work, humanity. So I mean, but of course the show gets out of it by that was a different Jesus, right? It's not Jesus of Nazareth.
No, Jesus is a common name, quite a common name in the Middle East at this time.
Yes.
Um, yeah, no, I like that, and again, there are certain jokes and stuff I think that play with it quite well. But you're right. I mean, he starts out in that sort of like he is almost like on a gap year or whatever, and he's out there with his with his friends. Like he is, whether he is Jesus of Nazareth or not, he is a known. He appears to be like a known individual within this Indian town or this Indian city, or whatever. He's being chased down by soldiers. And so he has some sort of, I'm assuming he has some sort of notoriety, and he is sort of, spouting these sort of these Christian ideas, early Christian ideas and stuff. So it's sort of, it's interesting. Like I say, it's quite brave stuff, like you say, to be saying, oh yeah, now they're going to, now we're basically going to show him that, yeah, all these ideas that you've had, this idea of peace and acceptance and turning the cheek, all going to be corrupted. All of it's going to be sort of turned into complete mush. And let's say for him to sort of have that reaction of going back, and he's like, "No, I'm going to go to the bar and I'm going to fornicate, and then I'm going to build a statue and I'm going to idolize it a little bit." And sort of, no, it is. It's quite good stuff actually.
Yeah, and even though that winds up not being, the real quote unquote Jesus, when he's in that, like, I'm going to misbehave segment there, he makes this speech about how, why are you telling me I'm breaking the 10 Commandments? God breaks the 10 Commandments all the time, which of course is quite true. I mean, the response to that should be, well, those are commandments for us, right? Obviously, but God is a jealous God, and says so. And Jesus points out, those 10 Commandments don't seem to care about women and slaves. All quite right,
I like the woman's reaction though. He's like, he murders thousands of people, and he's like, no, that's not murder, that's genocide. I think they're different.
Well, it's the Hitler thing, right? I mean, you kill enough people and it's okay again, right?
Yeah,
people forgive it.
You seem to move up a category. No, it's but there are simple things in this, like the introduction of the bag, which it's really silly of him, but he goes into the future, and almost in order to ground him, all he wants is a bag, like all this amazing technology and things and sort of around him, and it's there's some clever bits in this. This is 3 episodes in, and I'm like, right, they are still retreading old ground a little bit, but they seem to be they're getting sometimes they get slightly sharper with it, and I think this is again, Trojan was all right, Fathers and Sons was good and had some great moments. This I'm laughing at. I would say I'm laughing at more so than the previous two.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how funny I find this, but I do think it's clever. I do like, it's the kind of stuff where I think, oh, I see what you're doing, and I'll defend this. The bag joke is good. There's another little bit that, ironically is kind of predicting, a kidney plot in season 11. But, Crichton says out of nowhere, well, they're talking about Jesus having a kidney stone. And Crichton says, oh, I've been operating on Mr. Lister for years. And Lister's horrified. And he says, oh, well, I had, the commanding officer Rimmer's permission. And then you find out, Lister has discovered his own organs at the beginning of the episode and cooked them, and Kat has taken them and eaten them. And of course, this is not seriously in continuity. I mean, but it is so ghoulish and so just horrific. It's just a little aside. It's not important to the show, but it really goes there, and that's much more. That's my kind of humor. It's just so terrible.
Well, again, it goes back into sort of that retreading of things that have gone before. So sort of like Crichton's mollycoddling and mothering of Lister, and how it gets into sort of creepy territory.
Yeah.
But this notion that he waits for him to go to sleep and then drugs him, so that he basically sedates him and then does performs operations on him. Yeah, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and that's where I think this is good because again, it's just a little aside. It's not a major point. It's just sort of a little explanation, and so yeah, I do sort of think it's good. And again, like, Crichton gets some good reactions. Like again, sort of slight nods to things that have gone before because they travel all the way to India to get some lemons, and they're like, right, what do we need next? And they're like, well, we need copper. He's like, okay, well, isn't Britain... Weirdly, Kat says, well, isn't Britain known for its copper?
Right.
And Crichton's like, Crichton's just instant sort of rage of like, we needed a shopping list. I told you we needed a shopping list. We wouldn't have had this problem if we'd had a shopping list. Again, sort of, to me, harkens back to the sort of, I forget the name of the episode, but the one in Series 7 where his head keeps exploding, sort of like that rage he sort of got slightly pent up inside. So yeah, no, I'm enjoying this episode, and I'm slightly more reassured about the series. Yeah.
What do you make of the next one, Entangled?
Entangled is again, it's an interesting one. Again, it goes to this thing of sort of like them just coming across people randomly, and things, and the fact that like Gelfs are so sort of widely spread now that they should just be an alien race. It's all right. It feels like it should have stakes, but it doesn't. It's sort of like he's got that. He's going to get out of it. So basically, like Lister has a device, an explosive device attached to his crotch. I don't know. This one just feels a little bit thrown together.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like it has the sort of the A plot is that this thing of sort of like they've got to pay off the Gelfs because he's lost Rimmer in a poker game, which is quite a funny joke. And he's potentially lost Starbug as well. But then it's sort of that A plot of doing that is fine. But then this whole thing of sort of the quantum entanglement between Crichton and Kat.
Yeah.
Seems
why is that
just
even
really? There? I don't know. It's one of those things of like throughout the episode, I'm thinking I think I've missed something. I really think I've missed something as to why this is important, and it never really sort of feels like it pays off. Yeah, I don't know. It's a similar thing of like the A plot is fine. They go and they find this idea of a bad idea scientists that you develop bad ideas to see if they can make good ideas and stuff. It feels it feels like it should be a good idea, but it never quite. There's even like a really small thing in this episode that really bothers me, but it never this is an episode that never gels. Like all the bits never sort of fit together. They get a scientist. They meet this person who seems to have de-evolved themselves into a chimp, into an ape, and then they obviously re-evolved them, which I'm fine with. And she's very, she seems entertaining, and she's pretty attractive, really. So that's all great. But she's supposed to be a dimwit, and they show that by the fact she constantly wears her glasses upside down.
Right.
And I'm just like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, the evolution ray thing is not great either. It's not funny. And it's also, we've seen it before. It's a stupid thing that, you can de-evolve somebody. Okay. And then the whole idea is that she will choose wrongly, so you get her to kind of like eliminate the possibilities in order to turn off the groinal exploder. Yeah, I'm not buying it. I know it's like the synchronicity thing. I think the only reason you have this entanglement idea is to justify coincidences. But I think that I'm a lot more down on the A plot than you are. I think right from the very beginning, you have not seen Lister gamble. Lister just kind of wakes up and says, "Oh, I've gambled away Starbug and I've gambled away Rimmer." And I think, okay, so when you gamble, you pony these things up. You don't assume that if somebody says, "Well, I lost the car last night at poker," that the car's sitting in the driveway and they're supposed to deliver it. So why were we not shown this? And then we're told information which is false information because he hasn't lost Rimmer. He's supposed to deliver Rimmer. The groinal exploder is, it's fine. It's Red Dwarf silliness, that's fine. But, this joke of trying to exchange Rimmer, for the spoon of destiny, which especially coming off of the Jesus episode, the spear of destiny. This is fine. I love the erroneous reasoning academy, that tries to be wrong to spur discovery since so many discoveries were based on error. I think this is a great idea. This is the one thing that I remembered from the season. And I love that. But I was shocked watching this episode that they do nothing with it. And as much as I want to like the professor, Irene Edgington, all they do with her is have her guess numbers and know that through process of elimination, can't be that one, golly gee, except then it is at the end. So it's like, okay, that's not funny. It's not very successful. And then I guess it's mildly clever that she sort of, accidentally gets stuck in the airlock and then accidentally pushes the button that throws herself out of it. But then, the episode ends so abruptly that it's sort of like, well, okay, I get it. You can't have Lister be the last human if you've got her around. But it just all seems like, sound and fury, indicating nothing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the ending to me also throws some, again, it comes back to these character things. Like it's things to throw away. But like the fact, she is shot into space. Like, let's not forget, she is killed outright at the end of this episode.
Yes.
Not in any way sort of like taken out. No, she is killed outright. And we know that there's been a whole thing about, again, in fact, it's going to come up in the next flaming episode about Dave not contributing to the human race and all this other stuff. Yet, he makes no advances to this woman to say, really, we're the last humans alive. We've seen him do that before. He just lets it slide because Rimmer's making sort of eyes at her. And then when she dies, they're both a bit like, meh, oh well, that seems to happen.
Well, they know that they're going to return to the status quo. I mean, you make an excellent point about Lister, but I mean, don't you just feel at the end like it's just the writers going like, well, we got to kill her.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Like she's got to go, but it just feels like such an abrupt way, and for them to not really have any emotion or any sort of feel about it, it just feels really sort of like, I know we've said about them being sort of despicable people or willing to show them in a negative light. But this ending, and this is one of those weird things we've said before about sort of how some episodes don't seem to match up. But the ending of this episode of her being flushed into space and killed, to then be followed by an episode where Dave is mourning the loss of the human race.
Yeah.
And stuff like, you're like, oh no, well, you had someone from the human race not long ago. And you didn't seem too bothered about them being flushed out into space. Like, one of the things I think about, and I think about it more as I watch this series, I think about other sitcoms and how they handle things around continuity. And I think about American sitcoms in particular. I mean, if I was to hold up, say, sort of like Friends or The Big Bang Theory, and they're a very different beast. I understand that. And
please don't,
different
by
elements.
The way. Please don't.
No, but the point to make is that although they are a sitcom and they're based around comedy, is the fact that a lot of the relationships and the things that happen are, they have continuity. They exist within that time, within that sort of mythos. But with this, I get that basically, and this seems to be more of a British thing for many sitcoms, is just sort of like, this happened, it ended, we moved on to the next thing, and they may not gel very well, but at least they were trying to be funny with it. And I get that, but there's part of me that's like, I think, again, more could be done with this concept of them being in space. And the whole I'm getting to a point, especially since we had Series 8, and I actually enjoyed Series 8 more rewatching it than I did possibly the first time round. I'm now going back and thinking, no, when you were doing that, it was good. When you were doing that thing where there was continuity and there was consequences, and things were being sort of were sort of carrying on and that thing, that was good. You were sort of expanding, you were sort of maturing, it was getting good. This sort of feels almost like some of it's good, but it's a step back into an era of sitcom that we've passed, and I'm sort of feeling it a little bit in some of these episodes.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think you make the point about the end of the episode better than I would. I think that the point of them not having an emotional reaction, I just watch it and I think, there's sort of like a moment where I think, did they really just kill her? Is she really? I mean, the thing that I think is, I don't know. I just, and then that occurs to me, and then I think, oh, well, that was just to get rid of her, end credits. It never occurs to me like, well, we should have that emotional reaction. And that could actually play into some of those themes of the next episode of kind of mourning for the human race. But I mean, you're entirely correct about this. It also, it also occurs to me like there's no attempt to save her. I mean, we have literally seen, like in the previous episode, Dave going outside the ship and being stuck outside the ship. And, now he's in a suit. But with all of their technology, it's just like, oh, she literally just got blown out the airlock. Nobody says, we've got to get her. We've got like a minute before she, or 3 minutes or whatever before she dies. They're just like, oh, well, guess she's gone, and the emphasis is that Arnold won't get to have sex with her because she had just consented to have sex. That's a joke. She's an object to be thrown out of an airlock as a joke. I mean, and she is, as far as the plot goes, right? I mean, I'm not making a serious, I'm not hitting it too much for sexism, but it's more important that Arnold almost got laid, but didn't, than that he died.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of, I'm not saying it's a crude joke or anything like that. Like, it's fine. But I don't know. It just, again, it sort of feels short-sighted is probably the way I'd put it. It just feels short-sighted. And sort of, maybe it's because I have such rose-tinted glasses towards some of those earlier episodes, and this thing exists then. But seeing it now, with these newer episodes, it just seems a bit more obvious. But it sort of feels the whole thing sort of with Dear Dave, that sort of this thing of missing the human race, and then the sort of the coincidence that he gets a letter sort of saying he may or may not be the father to someone. That's interesting. And again, it's sort of like, well, we've just sort of, but we've highlighted that you are your own father, so we've already had a sort of a father thing. But I understand this missing the human race. It's sort of like the world that is lost, and so that but I do like this idea of if this letter appearing into the the far reaches of space, and saying like before you left this has happened and you've never known about it. again, like say, how would you deal with that? Like, because you could be like, yeah, that was 3 million years ago. I'm not going to worry about it a great deal. Or, in Dave's case, he's like, well, yeah, but I could have had a great 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 grandson who's a doctor and changed the world or done this and that. I could have contributed in some small way, and to him that feels important. And so I kind of like that about him, that he's like, look, I wanted to have done something rather than be stuck here in this spaceship for the rest of my life. I don't know. So what do you think of this idea in Dear Dave?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those cases where, I feel as if the show is repeating things, and at least in those earlier episodes, I could just sort of defend that they're doing something with a bit more cleverness, or there's a new spin on it, with Howard and things like this. I think that, with Dear Dave, I think we've had this episode before that starts with Lister's depressed, right? Isn't it, is it Blue? That sort of starts like that, and that's the main thing.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, we've done this before. Then this whole thing of, like, I like the letter business. Basically, all the letter business sort of works for me. I like this idea. It's kind of a callback to those letters arriving where, you and I were joking, they clearly don't have email. But, at this point, it's charming, right, that you're getting this snail mail and that they sort through it, competing and looking. I mean, there's charm to that. But, this thing about him wanting to feel as if he accomplished something. Well, we've gone through, first of all, he's been proud of being the last human before. Ouroboros, which we just sort of referenced and legitimized in some way, was all about, winds up having him sort of being insanely proud about being the last human, and how he, in creating himself, leaving himself in a box, was ensuring humanity would survive forever, which makes absolutely no sense. But, if you had a child, maybe that child did something. They're all dead now. That was 3 million. I keep thinking, like, that kid's been dead for 3 million years. This is a curiosity. I understand why you'd want to have had the child. That's more interesting. It's kind of cool to think that he lived and what happened there. But it's all academic at this point. You did not accomplish something because they all died.
Yeah, you didn't parent that child.
No.
And this was the thought that sort of sprang to me, was like, even if it was your sort of like genetic lineage, that's fine. And if you did have a grandson that became a doctor, or even your son became a doctor, like, that's not down to you.
Right.
That you didn't parent him or raise him or educate him or anything else. Like, that's just because he happened to have the life that led him there. So, I don't know. I think when writing this, I think they feel there's more emotion involved in this. I find it interesting that Dave goes there. I think, for him to have to deal with that. But I think they do think there's more emotion involved in this than there actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I think they think, oh, there's definitely something here. It's...
Well, I mean, in the same way, this whole thing of, like, there's a good bit where Kat is saying, because there's the letter says, I don't really know if you're the father. It might be Roy. And Lister remembers Roy. And, there's a good bit where the cat says, like, don't think about her with Roy, and goes into great detail. And I think, okay, it's a good bit. It's funny. It's one of the funny bits of this episode. But, and I also think, well, we've seen Kat do this before, right? Yeah. And it always works, to one degree or another. This works well, but even the jokes that are working well there, we've seen before. But there again, it's like, well, to my knowledge, we haven't heard of this woman before. Why are you so jealous that this woman who's not Kachansky, who, by the way, you're not out looking for, despite, back to Earth, oh, remember that old girlfriend? She might be pregnant, and I'm so mad that she cheated on me. They've all been dead for 3 million years, man, and you haven't, you're not looking for Kachansky, who you could find. I don't know.
No, I agree. I mean, you're right about the cat, because the whole thing there with with the image of her being with this Roy is very reminiscent of Duck Soup, isn't it? In his claustrophobia and that sort of thing. Yeah, it feels meaningless, doesn't it? Really, I mean, because even if he wasn't, let's face up to it. Even if he wasn't 3 million years into deep space, the Lister that we would have met early on, in fact, even now, I'm not entirely sure he would have stepped up as a father. He was on the mining ship Red Dwarf. He was going off into deep. He was going off to do that for whatever purpose. And then even if he'd have found out, what was he going to do? Go home and support her? I don't feel that for all the stuff we've said about Lister being a stand-up guy, would he have done that? Could he have done that? I don't know. It never sort of feels valid, does it?
Yeah, I mean, he's not the dad type. What I do love, what stands out for me about this episode, what I absolutely love about the episode I think this is a lackluster episode. I don't especially care about this episode. I mean, I like the letter business is fine. What absolutely stands out for me, what's memorable, are the vending machines. And this Lister, this is the one where you were referencing earlier, that Lister hits on the Vendabar machine, and then there's the hot drink dispenser that, well, actually, Lister hits on the French hot drink dispenser. The Vendabar machine is jealous, and she says, she's such a trashy machine. Is that what you like, Dave? And then Dave apologizes, takes her around the corner, and it ultimately, maybe goes a little too far, not because Dave seems to be humping it, but because my objection is that he has accidentally knocked this over and he's trying to pull it up from on top of it, which lets Arnold turn the corner and see. So, I mean, I don't buy that, but it is a kind of funny gag that Arnold's looking for, a moment of insanity and sees him humping a vending machine. So, I mean, the vending machines are the standout for me, even more than the maybe I had a child.
Yes, no, I agree with that. Because I do like the moment she sort of, he's sort of convinced this female voice vending machine, he can give her anything she wants, for this whatever purpose. And all she wants to do is see around the corner. I like when he does knock her down, the vending machine's reaction is like, I've never seen the ceiling before. So yeah, it's okay. I'd forgotten you mentioned about sort of the B plot of this thing of Rimmer being demoted because he hasn't turned up to work for 3 million years. Again, it comes. I know they keep sort of harking back to this thing of sort of the Space Corps and the JMC sort of like punishing them, or having some sort of punitive action against them for something. And I'm like, who's going to enforce it? Like, what does it matter? Like, and I know there's a whole thing around status there, but even if he was to be sort of demoted, like, I don't think anybody would care. Like, it sort of always feels a little bit,
forced, like artificial.
Artificial, yeah. It's like, if he was to be demoted to, third technician or whatever, like Lister, it might actually be, it might bother Rimmer because of it, but nobody would treat him any different. They'd still wind him up and do all the stuff. Like, it feels
right. I had the same thought. And the other thing is we've seen that before, right? This. I mean, obviously, it's initially part of the concept that Rimmer wants to be an officer. And this will come back, in the 11th season with like Officer Rimmer. But again, it's like, why do they? I mean, at this point, 9 years have passed just after season 8, right? They've already been in space for like what, 6 years, since since they revived. Then you have another 9. So we're at least like 15 years into being alone. Yeah, I mean, why do you have any system of authority? Clearly, these are, Lister doesn't obey authority anyway. Why does this matter to anyone? I agree. I mean, who's going to enforce any of this? Unless you have a computer like Pre. I mean...
Yeah, but even then, she's using predictive and she uses this logic. I'm sure she'd struggled with that. Well, the JMC no longer exists. It's sort of 3 million years in deep space, but like yeah, it's I don't know. It's this thing around Rimmer wanting to become an officer, and or even protect his position as commander of the ship because he's the highest ranking, the ranking person.
Mm-hmm.
It's all fine, but it always feels sort of like it's a character flaw or a personality flaw rather than it should ever be a story piece. And every time it sort of seems to crop up more and more as a story piece, it just, I don't know, it becomes tiresome, or it's becoming tiresome. I mean, if we go back to the first series, in some of those first episodes, it makes sense. I get it in that, So the idea of, when Lister wants to become a chef because he can outrank, they address it in those first episodes. He wants to become a chef so he can outrank, Lister because he can outrank Rimmer.
Right.
And he actually says even that, like he says, because he has the conversation with Holly. It's like, it doesn't matter to me, but it matters to him.
Right.
Because then he'll have to do as I say, and he says it. Like, you will do as I say because this stuff means something to you. But that was, like I said, was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And you're thinking like, does it still mean something to you? Surely everything you've gone through and you should have learned. But but again, as I say, he hasn't learned from it because this is the new Rimmer. So could you put it down to that? This is still the season 8.
Right.
Rimmer that's become a new hologram. So
no, that's a good point. Except this Rimmer's been around as a hologram longer than the old Rimmer was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, either way. Well, and the other thing is, in all of these flashbacks and back when the Red Dwarf was back in Series 8, Rimmer didn't always obey his commanding officers, right? I mean, the whole idea that he would obey Lister if he were captain. Rimmer toadies to authority. Rimmer wants authority. He craves authority and respect, and he toadies to authority. But he does not, in fact, obey orders. He doesn't know the regulations. We just got through an episode where predicted he bollocks up this repair. He doesn't follow the regulations. He doesn't follow the rules. He doesn't actually do what he's told almost ever.
No, that's true. That's very true. So yeah, it just feels sort of like it's a continuation of retreading old things, but just not as good as it was before. And so it sort of feels a bit sort of like saggy and old and stuff at this point. And it sort of, yeah. So I mean, I think Dear Dave, as I thought this, I think this series ramps up. I'm wrong because I do dislike this episode. I get bored of it. But I will be honest. I do like the next episode. So the beginning, I do enjoy it.
So tell me why you like this, right? Well, make your pitch.
Yeah. Again, I don't know. Make my pitch. I like the opening. I like this idea of they've been around so long now that actually they've started to make almost not so much friends, but they have acquaintances throughout this sort of sectors of space. Because the thing, as I say, is they are clearly, the thing that I think is highlighted from this series as well, they are no longer trying to get home. They're not trying to travel back to Earth. They just seem to be sort of traveling around space because they keep, they have repeat interactions with people now rather than going on a single course back to Earth. So I like this thing of when the guy sort of breaks in and he's almost like, he challenges him to a duel across time and space, and they're like, oh, come on, like we've done this so many times, like can we not do this? Can we do something different, or we've done this, and so I kind of like that. I like the fact it carries on. These what they call it? What's it called? The death ship that they come across. When they're in the blue midget and the sort of the rogue simulants or these simulants and then sort of thing. I don't know, just sort of like it's just something different. There's an episode in season 11 we'll get to again where it sort of gives you sort of interactions of other characters. And it's a bit silly, but this sort of thing, like, when the guy hands him the sword and he's like, take care, sort of like, take care of it. And he commits Harry Carry, and the guy sort of, his commanding officer, sort of the leader of the simulants, is sort of like, no, I wanted you to polish the sword. That was the punishment. He's like, well, no, that wasn't really clear, sort of what you implied this. And some of that stuff, I don't know. I enjoy that. Again, that sort of interactions with those simulants. Again, when he sort of says, like, so I don't want toadying lackeys. I don't want to be surrounded by yes men. The debate is the thing. And then one of them debates is like, kill him straight away. I enjoy that. And I think the ending, again, I think because it lands on Rimmer, and again, the whole thing of Rimmer finding out he's not, his dad wasn't his dad, it is neither here nor there. I don't like it as a retcon. I'll be honest. I think it's a cheap moment to get to him being able to do what he does. I think he could have done that a different way, but it landing on Rimmer to actually to save them, and them actually turning to him and saying, "Well, you know all this strategic crap. Like, you've read all these books. Like, you should come up with something." The finale of this is actually quite good as an episode go. I think the moment when Crichton sort of says, I did a recce of whatever weapons are on board, and Rimmer's like, yes, well, I was going to ask you to do that next. When he clearly wasn't, but it turns out to be like 2 forks and a pencil sharpener. But then the choice he makes at the end it's stupid and daft and probably shouldn't work, but I like the fact that it does. And it does sort of, again, sort of like, I like Rimmer, and I like, weirdly, and I like the fact that it pays off. Yeah, he does save the day. And so I enjoy that. But one of the things, that he remains Rimmer. Like, he does find this stuff out. But like the first thing he does when he finds he has to do a strategic battle plan is he does battle plan prep timetable. Like, he preps a timetable. And like, so and again, that harkens back to him in the first sort of couple of the series, isn't it? And that sort of thing. So it's just an enjoyable end to this series. It may be, for all intents, it may be because Dear Dave was such a dip that in context I'm enjoying it more. But I don't know. This one made me chuckle, and I kind of enjoy Rimmer standing up for himself at the end when he does say, like, no, this will work. We have to believe, and then gives a terrible, terrible inspirational speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy this episode. I think there's some good stuff in it.
Well, I mean, nobody can possibly argue with the fact that it's enjoyable and works for you and is funny. It doesn't for me. I like the opening. I mean, there are more flashbacks like that in this series, and then in 11 too. That begins with this flashback of his father mocking him in front of the class, and this female student warning him that he's a guinea pig, and he takes it as an insult, which I thought reflects his lack of self-confidence. So I quite like that opening. I actually like the retcon. Much like I think that I am more receptive to the Howard Rimmer thing than you are, I'm more receptive to this idea of sort of like being freed of your family, this idea of being freed of that pressure and of them being frauds. I like that, in a way that works for me. Now, as far as like, this Gelf, this simulant who sneaks on the ship and stuff, I mean, I think it's funny that clearly, like, he threatens one after another, and they just direct him to Lister. And initially I thought, well, okay, that's funny. They just sort of know they're just throwing Lister under the bus. But in fact, then you find out that he's been doing this forever. And then I think, when did that happen? How many times has he been sneaking on Red Dwarf between episodes? I don't remember this guy. This seems to me like more of a retcon than, I don't know. It irritates me. And I often have this problem, like in the same way of like when Lister loses Rimmer and it's in a game of chance that you have not been shown. And then the way it's verbalized to you is, I lost Rimmer last night, at cards. And then Rimmer comes in the room. And I think, oh, what you were supposed to say was, I've got to deliver him tonight. And you didn't give that information. So I assumed Rimmer's no longer on the ship. And now Rimmer shows up. In the same way, I feel like that joke about them pointing him to Lister is not them throwing him under the bus. It's them knowing, oh, this is the thing that Lister does with that guy. But I don't know that. So by the time I figure that out, the joke meant something different. And I thought it was amusing because of how they were acting, but not because of what I was supposed to think was amusing, because I didn't know that, because the show did not communicate that effectively. That's a pet peeve, but I'm always irritated by when something's not communicated effectively, especially if the humor depends on that.
I can see what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I think for me, the one thing I've taken, especially because of all the gaps as well, we do know that they have been trading and interacting with other life forms, mostly Gelf life forms, and sort of, they've obviously met other simulant life forms and that sort of thing. So to me, I'm just sort of like, this is obviously, to me, this is just a window into those between episode interactions, or even between series interactions. And I'm fine with that. I would have like say it would be good to sort of have some background to it. But again, the thing with sort of like Rimmer's dad, I don't know. It just feels like it's sort of like the whole thing has been that you've always learned that he almost starved, he almost suffered from died from malnutrition because he was constantly being forced, like with the rest of them, to sort of answer astronavigation questions and couldn't get them right. He was sort of thrown on the rack to make sure he was tall enough, and then you find out sort of like more and more about this sort of relationship between he and his father. And then you get this flashback, which proves that he was a teacher, that's something new. But then to also find that he wasn't actually his father, I was sort of like, so why do all this stuff? Because you clearly treated the others the same. Like, all the other brothers got treated the same. It's just that Rimmer couldn't keep up. So, I don't know. It's sort of, there's an odd thing there of like, well, yeah, he raised you. He treated you like crap, but he treated everybody like crap by the sound of it. But he still raised you and took you in and acted as father until you came of age. I don't know. It just feels like a weird moment to introduce this thing of almost like he says, you're to watch this, read this message, or to view this message when you become an officer. And I'm like, yeah, but to what purpose? Like, is it to show that like you did this despite being the gardener's son, or despite the fact that I treated you like crap? I don't know what the purpose of the message is or the information.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just that this is something the father has withheld from him. So, it's kind of like, once you have achieved this thing that I pressured all of my sons, whether they were, genetically my son or not, to do, it's time for you to find out the truth. I mean, I guess part of why I like it is because of the irony that he's happy, to be related to Dungo, the imbecile gardener. That's like, it feels very right that Rimmer would somehow feel relieved to be related to an imbecile. I don't know. I mean, I like that that sort of switch up. I do feel I'm more troubled by the way it contradicts the first episode and the revelation of Howard. That
Mm.
um, okay, well, first of all, weren't you like we've already deconstructed the fact that you felt you had to live up to your brothers and your father's example, right?
Mm.
Your family's been deconstructed and shown to be a fraud. Well, here we're showing it again. Okay, well, my problem with that is less the revelation and more that we've seen Arnold have to ante up or evolve time and time again. And now I feel like, well, we've literally seen this season, and we're
Mm.
repeating shows within a season now.
Yeah, and if it was 20 episodes long, I'd understand that. But this is 6 episodes,
Yeah.
and it literally bookends the series. It's that that's the part that bothers me, is that sort of the whole father revelation. But I think it's the Rimmer succeeding at the end, and I think just seeing some of the crews, another crew interacting on that ship, is again something I kind of enjoy. Seeing those simulants sort of acting out that sort of stuff. I mean, it's
No,
not
I
great.
think that's cool.
But it's still, yeah.
No, I think that's cool. And I mean, I hate that conclusion. I mean, I don't know. I think I get what you're saying about seeing Arnold succeed. The episode in which he becomes Ace Rimmer, I find much more satisfying. Although I get
Yes.
it, this is a different Rimmer. But I think about that and I think, yeah, I've seen a better version of this. And I don't know what this has that, at least like, the Howard Rimmer thing is like, oh, that's a clever way of dramatizing that the original show just didn't think of. Here I just kind of think like, oh, well, I've seen this. I mean, I do like seeing the other ship. It's kind of weird. And I don't know, like those 2 vignettes of like him being compassionate and saying, I just wanted you to, I mean, to polish the sword. Part of why that's so funny is he's pulling his own guts out as he leaves.
Yeah.
It's so over the top and wonderful. And then literally the next vignette is him being cruel and killing somebody. And I think, well, is he the compassionate one who doesn't want them to kill themselves, or is he the one who kills them? I mean, I do love that you see the other ship. I hate that conclusion, though. I mean, partly it's that there are some funny lines along the way. I mean, I think by far the funniest is, what do you think they want? Although the rogue death ship didn't indicate its exact designs, you know, there are funny bits, but I have a pet peeve for characters defeating more powerful characters by lining them up in a row and ducking.
Yeah.
Especially when it's based on, you shoot the walls of your ship to make stuff pass through it. That gun only exists because it was introduced for no reason in the middle of the episode. And then I think they say, oh, he shot all 4 bulkheads. Well, there's still a ship around you. You're not intangible.
Yeah.
I don't know. It bugs me.
What it was, again, like I say, plans like this have been, have existed in Red Dwarf repeatedly. Because it's Arnold Rimmer that comes up with his plan and carries it out, you approach it one way. If it had been Ace Rimmer that had done this and had done it with that sort of like, that cocky smirk and a sort of a flick of his hair, would you have felt the same way? Or would it have been, it's a ludicrous plan. Of course it was going to work because that's what Ace Rimmer does.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, we've seen Ace Rimmer jump out of a plane and surf an alligator to the ground, right? I mean, we know like basically Ace Rimmer has all the luck. He gets all the girls. Yeah. There's nothing about this version of Rimmer. He's not turning into Ace Rimmer. I mean, if he decided like, I'm going to become Ace Rimmer, and then suddenly he gets all the luck, and it's played off as a gag, I'd probably think, oh, that's funny. But he's not becoming Ace Rimmer. He's just coming up with a strategic plan that I think, well, not only should this not work, I don't want it to work. It's so, I mean, I just hate that cliche so much. I don't want it to work. And I don't want to feel like I'd rather they all get blown up than see what I see, you know? I'm sorry.
No, it's fair. I can see what you're saying. I do share the point of the plan is, relies on total luck of them surrounding them exactly sort of like 90 degrees, sort of exactly sort of like in line with the ships. As well, this is that thing again that sort of like, we know that it seems to treat everything almost like in a sort of, two-dimensional travel aspects, doesn't it? Not forgetting that actually they're in space, so they can travel, three-dimensionally. So to have them all exactly on that same plane is very, very unlikely. But yes, I know what you're saying. I can appreciate what you're saying. But I still get a bit of a thrill out of that sort of the end.
Hey, if you enjoy it, you win. The most important thing is that the episode is called The Beginning. So I know that from this point on, Rimmer's going to be a hero, right?
Well, yeah, this is something that sort of, again, I would bother, because the very first episode is called The End, isn't it? It ends with them, with Lister grabbing hold of the cat and sort of looking at Rimmer saying, the slime is coming home.
Right.
And it's obviously echoed here with Rimmer saying that. Although it's not a callback because he wasn't there for that interaction. This is a different Rimmer. But that's the point, isn't it? Like you say, he says, I feel like a working class hero. It says the slime's coming home, as if, but that's meaning them going back to Red Dwarf. But yeah, it sort of suggests that he's going to be a changed character. And we're going to see quite openly that he's not a changed character. In fact, as you say, as you get to Officer Rimmer, he's not at all. One thing I would say, which I noticed, I think it's either in the first or second episode of season 11, as we get into it, the battle plan timetable that is created ends up in his bunk on the wall. So he's got it there as a memento, as a sort of a prize of this victory, which I think is quite cool.
No, I agree. And I do think that in addition to the sets being expanded, and for better or worse, now you've got all these computer screens with graphics on them, which are cool. I guess it's better than nothing, but I do like the sets. Partly as the sets are expanded, you do sort of catch these references. I mean, and he's got in his bunk in 11, right? These like Arnold Rimmer does it again, sort of clippings and stuff along with this timetable, which it never sort of clicked to me. It was like a memento of this episode, which is very cool. That's a good point.
But those things of him saying sort of, those stickers and things that you see, he had those in the first series. There was one that said Arnie does it best, and there's a couple of others. So it's very much in his wheelhouse to have those sort of, as he was supposed to put them, as inspirational stickers around his bunk.
That's a good point.
But it is quite cool. They do have those references. I mean, others will come back over the next couple of seasons. But yeah, we're jumping into series 11 really then. But overall, then, let's just finish off. So series 10, what are your sort of thoughts having discussed it through? Anything changed having discussed it, or?
No, I mean, I think that it's, I don't know. I mean, I maybe I liked it more watching it than I did recollecting it. I mean, I feel as if talking about it, really most of the stuff that I liked, besides like vending machine jokes and sort of things like that are fun, but maybe not meaningful. They're not a whole episode. most of what I really liked are things that I'll defend because I like the choice, or I think something's clever, or I admire what they're doing more than it's a great episode. And I think that watching it, I enjoyed it more than I'm letting on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. What I would say is, from my point of view, I think there are some real high points. I think there are some good jokes, there's some good moments, there's some good ideas. But I definitely feel that repetition of previous episodes, and so when I am going through this, and as you sort of said, like, Pre feels like Queeg. The moment of the cat sort of like raising the image of the previous girlfriend with the other boy, with the guy, instantly thinks of duck soup and the claustrophobia. And there's just these things again and again, and I'm just sort of thinking, like, are you trying to sort of reintroduce us to this series, or is it just that you've run out of ideas? It's not terrible. I mean, it's not, if I'm perfectly honest, it's sort of, all seasons have had some good stuff, but it's just average. I chuckled, I do laugh at some stuff, but it's very average. And so it's not lighting my fire yet, this reintroduction.
Well, there you go. A wobbly start for the Dave series. Whilst Series 10 may not have lit our fire, let's see, because we've still got 11 and 12 and the Promised Land to go. And I'm pretty sure things can only get better. A little wobbly from us at the beginning, but let's see what we think. So next week we will be jumping straight into Series 11. So next, guys, if you want to get in contact with us, if you think that our opinion of the Dave years, at least when they started, is wrong, or if you agree, or if you've got your own opinion, get in contact. Reach out to us on Twitter at PodTimeSpace. If you want to email us directly, you can get us under the 20th Century Geek banner. Email us at 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. But yeah, I'm really enjoying doing this series. I hope you're enjoying it too. Season 2, the full film reviews, is coming soon. We've already started recording that. So next week, we'll be having Series 11. So until then, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you. What? Don't cross the streams.